Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Friday, June 21st, 2024. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and change. Yup, me again. We are now almost done with week one of Dave Biddle's 2-week vacation. It's a yearly event, and it tends to cause this hair to get more gray. But you knew that already. Got a great show for you today. Doing something different, a little happy hour Bucknuts Morning 5 combo deal. Pat Murphy and I are joining forces today. We are going to do a defensive depth chart deep dive. Pat had a great story about this a little while back. We're going to break it all down. Any questions you have about that, please submit them as you want. And then any other questions about the weekend ahead or whatever, after the break, Pat and I will take our best shot at those. But first, you know what time it is. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to announce that smooth summer is officially upon us. When you're playing in the summer sun, make sure you're groomed from top to bottom. Thanks to our friends at Manscaped, you can make this season your smoothest yet. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the ultimate bundle to keep your guys downstairs cool while looking hot. Join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Get 20% off plus free shipping when you go to manscaped.com and use code BUCKNUTS. Summertime and the trimming is easy. That's right. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code BUCKNUTS at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping. The code's BUCKNUTS at manscaped.com. It's smooth sack summer, boys. Get on board or get left behind. One guy who never gets left behind, Pat Murphy. Pat, here's the real question I have. Usually on the happy hour, you have a cold beverage nearby that you sip on. It's now 9:02 a.m. in the East. I don't want to make a comment on your name, but will Pat Murphy be having a cold beverage of the alcohol variety during this show?
Not quite this early. I've got water here.
And that's not vodka?
No, it is not. It is a Friday, and I can't say that I haven't started drinking before 9 a.m. before. But no, there's stuff to get done today. I've got work to do. Have to help my mom build a stationary bike later. So,
oh Lord,
we'll save it for a few hours at least.
If I were going to do that, I would have to probably drink and then hire someone to do it in front of me, which would be much more fun. All right. Like I said, today is going to be a deep dive on the defense, and then we'll try and tackle a bunch of questions afterwards. Pat and I are not the gurus of recruiting, but we have commentary and thoughts on the weekend, and it's a big one. So, Pat, take it away. Your depth chart deep dive, and I will kind of filter in the questions here from the gallery as good questions about the defense come up. Show is yours.
Yeah, so I started this on the Bucknuts Happy Hour last week, doing a deep dive on the offensive depth chart. As you mentioned, Dan, I wrote about this last month, but I know not everyone goes back and reads everything, so I figured it was a good time to dive a little bit more into it. So defense, not a ton of questions on the defensive side of the ball just because so many guys returned. I think a lot of people would pick the same guys that I did as starters, but we'll just kind of run through it position by position. Defensive end, I think it's pretty obvious. JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, both back. On paper, especially if you were a big fan of these guys coming out of high school, this could be a dangerous duo. We saw towards the end of last season, Jack Sawyer really come on. His last few games were as well as he's played throughout his career, not only just statistically, where I think he ended the season with like 5 tackles and 4 tackles for a loss and 3 sacks in the final few games, but just the way he played. He looked like the Jack Sawyer everyone expected coming out of high school. JT Tuimoloau, you know what you're going to get. He can do a little bit of everything. Maybe he is not the perfect pass rusher or perfect this, perfect that, but he's talented across the board and can make a play at any time. We saw it at Penn State a couple of years ago. You saw it at Notre Dame last year when he got the big stop so that Ohio State could drive down the field. So those are going to be your starters. I don't think there's any question about that, assuming health. Beyond those two, I think Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson, are the two primary defensive end backups. Mitchell Melton, I think, is a name to keep in mind as well. He's currently listed as a linebacker on Ohio State's roster, will play that jack role to some degree. But I think he will be part of that rotation there with Larry Johnson having more options at defensive end. And Edric Houston is a name that keeps coming up, the 5-star defensive end. That early signing period press conference we had with Ryan Day, where that video of him kind of falling behind the podium when he found out that Jeremiah Smith was in. Remember that day they were also finalizing everything with Edric Houston too. And when Ryan Day left the room to go get on a phone to make sure Edric Houston was locked in, that was a big one as well. This is a kid who sounds like he came in ready to go. Now, whether he breaks in as quickly as, some defensive ends have in the past, given what's ahead of him, we'll see. But I certainly think he is a part of this rotation earlier than some of the guys we've seen recently. I think he can play a part this year, no doubt about it. I like the depth at defensive end. I think as long as guys play up to the level we expect them to, this will be a dangerous group. Moving on to defensive tackle, the interior, Tyleik Williams back. He needs to build on a monster junior season. Ty Hamilton stepping in to kind of replace Michael Hall Jr., who is now obviously with the Cleveland Browns. Clear starters, those two. Ryan Day said this week that one of his questions about this team is the 3, 4, 5, 6 at the interior defensive lineman. I think Hero Kanu is your obvious backup. He's been in the program 2 years. Obviously started playing football a little bit later than some, coming from Germany, but he, to me, is the next man up at that spot. And then I think you could have some debate about who is the 4th, 5th interior defensive lineman. Caden McDonald was the guy that I think has generated some of the most buzz recently, but Tywan Malone, who came in last year from Ole Miss, certainly going to be a factor after kind of settling in, focusing on purely football. He played baseball for the Rebels as well. Jason Moore, a young player they are really high on.
God.
Yes, I knew that. So I think that you've got a nice potential group there. You need guys to take a step for sure behind those starters, but you've got a group that I think most teams would drool at the potential of what you can do in the interior. And there's some other guys that may emerge. Will Smith Jr., where does he emerge on the defensive line? Guys like that, they were pretty high on that for one reason or another, haven't quite made it yet. So if things go as planned, the defensive line, the whole group, I think is a scary bunch this year. Guys just have to keep growing, keep building on what they've done in the past. Linebacker is an interesting one for me. I think Cody Simon is locked in as your middle linebacker. He's going to step in and play that Tommy Eichenberg role. We've seen him do it. We saw him do it last season when Tommy was out. Then who plays that other spot? In spring, the first team reps went to CJ Hicks almost exclusively. I think we saw some positive things, the type of player that made CJ Hicks a 5-star coming out of high school and everything. We just need to see it in games because he has not been able to deliver. Now, he hasn't gotten the playing time that you would expect from a guy rated as highly as him. But when he has been on the field, it has been a bit underwhelming, I have to admit. So does CJ Hicks hold on to that? How is Sonny Styles transition from playing that safety role that he played last year to linebacker? We saw him do a lot of work with the second team during spring, but there's talk about can they use all 3 guys on the field at the same time because of Sonny Styles' versatility. I think he probably is sort of in a rotation at the will linebacker spot with CJ Hicks, unless one of them really seizes the job during fall camp. You've got Gabe Powers in there as well. Arvell Reese, a name that just people keep talking about. He keeps impressing. I think some people thought he would move to defensive end or be an outside pass rush guy. He was working at middle linebacker at times this spring. So I've seen him a couple times out at the recruiting camp. He does not look like he did a year ago or when he was at those recruiting camps. I remember talking to him at those. Just physically, he clearly has taken the weight room seriously. If you're going to play middle linebacker, though, it's going to be about just as much up here. and the mental side of the game, which is kind of that next thing. I think Cody Simon has had to really develop in that after moving to middle linebacker. So again, options at that position, but I think of all of the groups on the defensive side of the ball, this is the one that I still have the most questions, especially at that will linebacker spot. And then who are the depth guys? Gabe Powers is an interesting one as well. Yes, exactly. They have not, because you had two starting linebackers the last two seasons, and only really Tommy Eichenberg missed some time, and it was towards the end of last year. You just haven't seen a ton behind those guys, and so there will certainly be. You will certainly have to prove that. Cornerback, again, I think you've got it pretty much locked in if you've been paying attention. Denzel Burke, Davidson Igbinosun back. I include Jordan Hancock in that group, even though I guess technically they consider the nickel as a safety spot, but he's a guy who obviously plays corner and can play on the outside as well. The depth is certainly there at this position. Jermaine Matthews Jr., we saw last year as a freshman come in and play well, started against Penn State and held his own when Burke was out. Calvin Simpson-Hunt, who was the higher rated of those two cornerbacks coming out of high school, he didn't enroll until the summer last year, so he didn't get that time to kind of get used to the college game. I think this offseason has gotten him back into the fold of someone who can certainly step in and play. Lorenzo Styles Jr. as the backup nickel, I think is very interesting. He took a year to readjust to playing defense after playing wide receiver at Notre Dame. And we talked to him and Sonny Styles during the spring back-to-back at interviews. And they both were just talking about how Lorenzo can get out there and make plays with his speed. He's now more comfortable at that nickel spot. He can play the outside too, but for me, you can't teach having that speed, especially with some of the matchups he may see if he has to come into games. I also want to throw out two of the younger guys in Aaron Scott Jr. and Bryce West. I think in a normal year, when you don't have this much talent returning in the secondary, those are guys who are going to, at the very least, get their feet wet, if not play a sizable role as a rotation guy, those rotation guys. Maybe they don't see as much time just because of that depth, but keep those two in mind. They are very talented, and I liked what I saw from them adjusting in the spring. And then finally, safety. Again, I think it's obvious who slots in. Lathan Ransom's back, assuming he's healthy. He's going to be your bandit safety. Caleb Downs, despite the talk of him playing running back, he is going to be your adjuster on the back end of that defense, stepping in for Josh Proctor. Not a lot to say there other than these are two guys that can get the job done. You've seen it, whether it be Lathan Ransom for the Buckeyes or Caleb Downs last year at Alabama, all SEC, freshman of the year in the conference, all that stuff. Behind them, there is not a ton of depth, but there is some depth. And they added a little bit more with Keenan Nelson Jr. from South Carolina, the transfer safety, who I believe is just arriving on campus or just arrived on campus this summer. Malik Hartford, look, the buzz about him last fall going into the season was a lot. He didn't live up to it quite. He did start, I think it was the second game of the season. And, I think there were just some teething issues, but the talent is certainly there. Jaden Bonsu got to get his biggest opportunity this spring with Lathan Ransom out and started the spring game. They really liked what he gave in that opportunity. So, you will have to be careful because behind those three, there is nothing in terms of experience talent. But, if you're going to rotate, you hope for health, obviously. I think that's a pretty solid group to have as your safety group, especially the two up top who I think, really bring together this secondary.
Yeah, when the term depth to me, I think sometimes can mean several things. One, and here at Ohio State, especially on the front row, it means rotation.
Yeah.
People want to see the youngsters get in there and make plays for sure. But here's what it also means. Football, here's the one guarantee you have about football right now. The roster, as not a guarantee, but the 22 starters you throw out there, there's a very good chance by the end of the year, one or two of them has gotten hurt.
Yeah.
And there's attrition. And if you have, we talk about depth here at Ohio State, and they've always got good players, but when you have real quality depth, you don't just get to rotate them so they stay more fresh. If a guy goes down, you have someone who can go in there and actually make plays. There have been times in this defense when a guy has gone down. Shoot, in the past, we used to flip a fullback to linebacker at times. Okay, so that's on the staff if that happens. When I look at the team this year, and look, we all know that the injury report, when it comes out each week, usually has a mystery contestant on there that we're like, we didn't know why this guy. So that depth is going to come in extremely handy. And then you just talk about serendipity or just pure luck of getting someone like Caleb Downs in the back. You could make an argument he's the best transfer you could possibly get. How do you get the like, for example, ESPN did a article that I thought was kind of interesting. Who is the best football player at every age from 14 to 40? Did you see that by chance?
Mm-mm.
So they started with the 40-year-old. Well, I think it was Aaron Rodgers because he's the only one who's 40 still playing. The 14-year-old was actually the quarterback that got offered by Ohio State from Florida at camp.
Yeah.
I want to say Ohio State had 17, as Jakeem Stewart was 17, then had 18, 19, 21, 22, and 26. Is that good? But Caleb Downs was the 18 or 19-year-old. I can't remember. So if the best player of his age on the planet transfers to your school, that's a good thing. All right, let's go through some questions here. Spider Sillery, how many interceptions do you think the team will have this year? Well, that's not a number I can come up with off the top of my head generally, but I do think it's fair to assume, wouldn't you, that more turnovers will be coming with the amount of talent they have on the defense?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up here. Last season they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 interceptions, it looks like, which is a laughably low number. I actually asked Denzel Burke about this after the spring game. He was one of the guys we got to talk to. And because there obviously were some turnovers, some interceptions in the spring game. And I asked, was this a reflection of, what's happened in spring? Was this a reflection of quarterback secondary play? How did he kind of see that? And he said, oh, we've been taking the ball away. And he said, and it hasn't just been the quarterbacks throwing us the ball. He said, we're going to have more turnovers this year. So this is something he's harped on in the past, which is why I brought it up to him. He flat out said last year was not good enough with the way that they, not only interceptions, but fumbles as well. So yes, I think that has been a focus this offseason to put these guys in better positions, guys to make plays. I think they will definitely have more than 7. How many? I think that's really tough to say. Maybe we do a bold predictions show later on in the before the season starts, and we can predict that number. But I'd have to give it some thought. But certainly, I think this will be a team that turns the ball more over than it has in the past, or at least recently in the past.
There's generally some randomness to turnovers as well. So if you're consistently getting to the quarterback, and I will say things have changed over the last few years. Very few quarterbacks are willing to stand in the pocket against Ohio State. I know we all want to see 100 sacks a game, but they know they're coming.
Yeah.
I have to assume Jeff Weimer, if I pronounce that correctly, his question is about the defense. Because if it's about the offense, I have the answer for you. And so does the rest of the world. We'll just let you fill that one in yourself. Which true freshman will get the most playing time?
On defense,
it's tough.
Yeah, because like we said, there's just so many guys coming back. I mentioned Edric Houston. That could be an answer. Maybe one of those cornerbacks, Bryce West or Aaron Scott, if for some reason they need to go deeper than we expect at that position, or if there is an injury. I think Edric Houston's probably the obvious answer just because I do think they will rotate, and I think he's going to be a part of that rotation. But I don't think any defensive freshman is going to have to play a ton unless things go wrong, whether it's injury or just guys not performing at their position. When you have this many seniors back on your roster and proven seniors, you just don't need to go to the freshmen a ton. I still think it's good to get them playing time, but turning to a guy to start or play a lot of snaps, I just don't think that's necessary for this team, assuming everything goes to plan.
The positive side of that is this. One of the reasons that team up north was so good is they had a lot of adults on the team. When I say adults, I mean like 23 22-year-old guys who were the COVID year guys who maybe even if they weren't there weren't a lot of guys drafted super high, but they were those like 4th, 5th, 6th round grown men. And when you're 18 going up against a 22 or 3-year-old that's been Ohio State's weight program for that much time, that's not really a realistic request. Especially the beauty of having all these guys back now is that there's no question if they're leaving. We've always been wondering, oh, are they leaving? Are they staying? Everybody knows they're auditioning for the NFL this year completely. And the depth chart, I think, behind it will fall into line because everyone knows it's a 1-year thing. It's just not like JTT and Jack have 3 years of eligibility left. All right. Yes, coaches need to coach smarter this year. I had another good one up here. Oh, yes, this one. Jermaine Runnels, one of our best. Is OSU doing the jack position, Sawyer, Reese, or Styles this upcoming season? I'll start that one and let you finish it. I don't think Jack Sawyer will be back at the jack. That was kind of, I don't say a failed experiment, didn't really work out. I don't really see that being used for Reese. My understanding is he is primarily, if not solely, playing middle linebacker. Maybe there are some, passing situations where he's lined up with a will or strong side backer might be, but he's playing middle linebacker. And then Sonny, I do think Sonny's going to be used all over the field, kind of like a designated weapon. To call him the jack, to me, would be a tad aggressive. Do you agree? Now, I know they're recruiting Justin Hill for the jack position because he kind of fits it perfectly. But have you heard any more on the jack or those 3 dudes playing it?
I think you're right on those 3. I think if you do see a guy used in that role this season, and look, this is a position we ask about a lot because we haven't really seen it. When they've used it, it hasn't even been what Jim Knowles' kind of vision for it is. But Mitchell Melton for me is the most likely guy because he is that versatile athlete. We obviously just haven't seen him with the knee injury and having to come back from that. I think it was last spring when he got hurt in the game. So that to me is the guy most likely to use it. But if you're Ohio State and you have all of these guys back, the defensive ends, the linebackers, everything, if it's going to plan, I don't know if you need to throw kind of I don't want to say a gimmicky position, but a wild card position, so to speak, out there if everything else is working the way it should with the players you've got. But if they do, I think it's probably Mitchell Melton.
Yeah, I think the wrinkles will come with Sonny, but I don't think it'll be at the jack. All right, we're going to take a break for an ad here. And even though Pat is one of their main sponsors, I'm going to read the ad, and that's Joy Mode. I think I speak for most men. I know I speak for Pat when I say we want to have better sex. And for the sake of our partner, we may need to have better sex. The issue is that over-the-counter pills contain unregulated chemicals, suggest unsafe doses, and include the risk of several other health problems. That's why we partner with our friends over at Joy Mode. Whether you're looking to spice up your intimate moments or increase your confidence in the bedroom, Joy Mode makes all natural and science-backed supplements dedicated to helping men perform better across their core functions. Their trademark product, the Sexual Performance Booster, is every man's solution for increased blood flow, firmness, stamina, and performance. It's like a pre-workout, but for sex. All ingredients have been assessed in peer-reviewed journals. All ingredients have been studied and researched in humans. Redefine your intimacy and go to usejoymode.com for 20% off with code Bucknuts. That's a 20% off and free shipping with the code Bucknuts at usejoymode.com. Ingredients with integrity, Joy Mode. All right, let's get back to talking defense. And then if you guys want to throw in some recruiting, we can do that as well. Would you take Jason Craven? Would you take Ohio State -3 touchdowns against that team up north? Cheats are turned off, so I would. Yes, they're going to have to beat us straight up. 21 points is a tad aggressive for any game. I'll let you answer that, but I'll say this. If the opportunity is there, my guess is they will take it.
Yeah, they certainly will take it. I think Ryan Day, the hang 100 quote from a few years ago hasn't panned out the way I think he hoped. But if that opportunity did present itself, I certainly think he would. I believe Ohio State opened as an early 9.5-point favorite against Michigan. I would probably feel more comfortable taking that one. Look, the main thing for me is I want to see what Michigan looks like. What is this new look team under Sharon Moore? What is Sharon Moore? We saw him obviously coach against Ohio State and some other games last year, but like, what is his team instead of Jim Harbaugh's team that he's just stepping in on game day to help coach? For me, I need to see what this Michigan team looks like. I think there's just a lot of questions about Wolverines and whatnot. So
at big positions too, quarterback and such.
Yeah.
I will say this: 35 Landa Kay. Maybe her name's Kay, and she lives 35 Land. Is that a Houston reference of some sort? Who knows? Good morning. I'm representing my sister Dee Sanchez while she's in the air on her way to Ohio for my nephew's official visit.
Nice.
This is excellent because I thought to myself, will the Sanchez be able to make today's show because they are coming for the official visit and coming through in a fashion like no other family ever has. They have a backup BM5/happy hour combo representative. So the Sanchez's, if there's a Mount Rushmore of families, they're going right to it, man. Before even Dev has not even been on campus as a real Buckeye yet, or however you want to interpret that, but they're already establishing a new high for families. Look at this. We're going to be good for that. All right.
I will say, speaking of Devin Sanchez, when we talked to Tavian St. Clair at one of the recent Ohio State camps, I asked him about guys he's recruiting. I should have that story done today, but he mentioned he is leaving the defensive side to Devin Sanchez. He was like, I was big on it at first. He's like, then we got the ball rolling. He's like, Devin Sanchez has taken that over. He's like, now I'm focusing on offensive guys. So just to throw that little nugget out there since we're talking about the Sanchez family. Good job.
Yeah, I mean, unparalleled. And Neem Offer will be here this weekend as well. David Sanders will be here this weekend. So Team Sanchez needs to put on their Cruton hat and get it done. And I have the utmost confidence in that. All right. A few more questions, and then we will let you guys go. Ed Thigpen, do we have a Larry Johnson replacement on the coaching staff, or do you think they go find someone for the D-line coach? What's funny about Larry Johnson is we started doing this X number of years ago when he came, and he was being negative recruited at the time for leaving. And since then, every single person that has negative recruited him has left their spot, and Larry is still here, including Nick Saban, by the way. So your thoughts on this?
It's a good question. His defensive assistant is Alan Clark, who has been here for since 2003. And I really like him as a coach. Whenever we are out there early before those recruiting camps, those one-day camps, and they're working out defensive linemen with Larry, Alan is right there with him. I don't know specifically how they feel about him in terms of taking over for Larry Johnson. Look, these are going to be big shoes to fill, right?
No doubt.
So if it were me not being in the building every day with these guys, I would say you go find the best defensive line coach in the country and offer him what it takes to bring him in so you don't have any drop off there. But, with the way Ohio State has done it in the past under Ryan Day, they have not hesitated to promote guys that they like. How much they view Alan Clark as a guy who could take over for Larry Johnson, I don't know the answer to that. But certainly the contingency plans have to be in place because you know that you're much closer to the end than the beginning with Larry Johnson's career.
Yeah, man, that's such a high-profile position in the current recruiting landscape. I mean, it always has been, but if it were me, I think you're probably want to go and get the most high-profile guy who's got the most connections from the program you could do the most damage to as well.
Yeah.
If you could take someone away from a big program while you're doing that, that's the way to do it. All right, we're going to end the show there. Big weekend on campus. Obviously, tons of it's funny. It's actually a joke. Yes, he is. And yes, the Armstrong twins are his hosts. And yes, they are 315 and 325. And yes, the future is bright.
Big dudes.
We will probably do a combo like this every now and then when people go on vacation because frankly, I'm spent a week of trying to be Dave and Dan at the same time. Dave is more than 50%, so it's been a challenge, but we'll be back on Monday. Here's what I would say. Lock into Bucknuts and Bill Kurlick for this weekend. The information is coming fast and furious. This is one of the biggest recruiting weekends of the year when you talk about possible ramifications. So lots of big names on campus. You already know Team Sanchez is there working for you. Bill Kurlick and Pat Murphy will be doing the same. Dave does owe me some cash. We'll see how that comes out. Let's just say I don't expect it. But I expect you guys to have a great weekend. Have a good one, Bucknutters, and thank you, Pat.